Hey everyone, before we get into this episode, I want to let you know about my free guidebook called Music Production Essentials. It's a brief rundown of my top 24 takeaways that I've learned over the course of interviewing so many audio professionals for this podcast. So just go to secretsonics.co and you'll see the image. It's a totally free download and I hope it helps you with your productions. Hey everyone, welcome back to Secret Sonics. This is episode 99 with Joe Montague. I had a great chat with Joe. We talked about so many things, including his journey playing in bands and Beatles tribute shows to recording drums from his own studio. We talked about his journey in acoustic treatment and mic placement, how he collaborates with artists doing remote drum sessions, and we just geeked out, generally speaking, about the Beatles, old school recording, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of a different kind of episode, a little bit more niche down into that 60s vibe and the Beatles, but I really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. So with all that to say, here's my conversation with Joe Montague here on Secret Sonics. You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Join us weekly for honest conversations with real-world music producers and audio professionals. Hello, and welcome back to Secret Sonics. I'm your host, Ben Wallach. My guest today is Joe Montague. Joe is a professional drummer and self-proclaimed Ringo fanatic. He currently tours worldwide in the internationally acclaimed theater show Beatlemania and has performed at the world-famous Cavern Club with the Cavern Club Beatles and worked with West End theater tour Let It Be. Joe now devotes most of his time recording drums out of his personal recording studio. Joe is supported by Amidia cymbals and Balbex drumsticks. Joe actually reached out to me after he heard the podcast and was a fan, and he told me about what he does, and I actually have a really soft spot in my heart or a warm spot in my heart for the Beatles and all that kind of stuff and that kind of vintage recording. So I invited him to join me on the air, so he's graciously agreed to do that. And so with all that to say, welcome to Secret Sonics, Joe.
Thanks very much. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to chatting Beatles with you.
Yes, definitely, and recording. So tell the audience a little bit about your story. You know, who are you, and how did music become a part of your life, and how did that kind of evolve into drumming and I guess recording drums?
So I guess I started off playing piano, was my first instrument. And then I remember watching Wayne's World and there's that scene where Garth plays the drums in the music shop. And that was the pinnacle for me. That was what I think, that and Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. That was from, just drums forever from those two movies. This is like 90s American nostalgia here. Yeah, Well, it was brilliant. I mean, I watched those two films endlessly. And I pestered my parents for a couple of years for a drum kit, and they finally bought me one Christmas. And, it kind of gathered dust in the bedroom for a few years. And then when I was about 12, I started taking it a bit more seriously. And that's when I started joining bands and just doing the sort of normal thing of being in bands, having some drum lessons. And then, and from that point, it was never any question in my mind that as to whether I was going to be professional or not. That's all I wanted to do forever. Like, I just wanted to be a drummer and I didn't entertain anything else. And then, eventually I had lessons with quite a renowned drum teacher here in the UK called Bob Armstrong, who's taught a lot of incredible drummers. And then moved on from Bob to go and study at Leeds College of Music, where I studied jazz, which was so technically that's where it took me. But I was always a pop drummer at heart, not that it's one that you sort of want to separate. It feels a bit umbrella terms to say pop and jazz. But,
I feel like there's a time where a lot of like musicians just define themselves as jazz musicians, and they go down that path for a while, even though at heart it's not really who they are. I feel like I've seen this with a lot of my friends here in Israel and in America also, like got to do the jazz thing. You got to go hard on that, the 251 and whatever it is. And then eventually people kind of make their way back to their true passions, what they really care about, like musically, it's interesting.
I think that's exactly it. And then when you come back, you really appreciate the nuance in pop playing, popular music playing. So just play, if obviously we'll talk about Ringo, but that the nuance in the way that he dances on the hi-hat, for instance, you take that for granted when you're a pre sort of technical ability, when you're a sort of teenager or whatever coming up on your instrument. And I think that having a jazz sensibility shines a whole new light on the sort of really nuanced details of your instrument.
Interesting.
So I kind of did that, and then just had a few years of general sort of working musician stuff, playing functions and a bit of teaching here and there. And then I auditioned to join Beatlemania, who's the band I currently play with, and that was from that point onwards was full-time music, just performing. So I stopped all teaching and everything like that. So I had a lot of time.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about Beatlemania? Because
of course,
I don't even know that much about it. Yeah.
Oh, so. No. So it's
I mean, I'm assuming what it is, but I don't know the full detail. You know.
So it's a theatre show that does one nights in theatres throughout the UK. It's the UK mainly, and then we do shows, festivals and things through Europe, and we play a lot in the Middle East, so Bahrain and those sorts of places.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the UAE.
Yeah, that's right. And we've been to...
those are our new allies here in Israel.
Well, there's a lot of money there, so we get flown over there a fair amount.
Amazing. Wow, cool. I'll have to ask you about that after the podcast.
Yeah. So it's rather than one of those theatre shows that goes and does a run in a theatre for a week or two, we just go in for the night. It's just one of those. And we kind of go out maybe 3-4 times a week at most. Rather than it being a long tour, it's just a permanent tour. So we'll go out every weekend playing, and sometimes it will be a run if we're over in Ireland or Scotland or somewhere far away from home. But then usually it's just, Friday or Saturday night, and that's it, back home again. And it's Very cool. Beatles tribute show. So we cover 4 eras from sort of Ed Sullivan era of the early 60s right through Shea Stadium, Sgt. Pepper's, and then we do Abbey Road at the end. So you sort of capture the whole breadth of the Beatles' career.
So cool.
Yeah.
It's basically a concert, I guess, more than there's no acting or anything involved, or is there?
There is a tiny bit, but it's, you've the relationship with the audience is, that we're not them, obviously. So we're just going to try and play to the, some theatre shows don't take the playing side of it quite as seriously, and we do pride ourselves a lot on the playing side of it. We want it to be as accurate as possible.
Very cool.
And I put the accent on when I talk, and we don't talk in our normal voices. We assume the characters, but it's still just normal, normal banter. And there is a rough script to what we do, but it's not acting in the traditional sense of acting at all. No.
Amazing. Okay, so continue on with your story. So you joined Beatlemania, you start touring the world. Yeah, go on.
So that meant that there was a bit of free time through the weeks where I wasn't really doing anything, and at that point I didn't have any children. So I kind of my long-term goal has always been to have a studio. Through my sort of career, sort of late teens, right through my 20s, I was recording in some amazing studios, and always was interested in what was going on. I have notes on my phone from years and years and years ago of what mics they were using on my kit at that particular point in time. And at the time, it didn't mean anything to me. But as I've gone on and revisited those lists, it's kind of fun to do. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do, and I found a space that I could rent. I was sharing with another chap, and I bought what was it? A Focusrite Sapphire. So just, real standard interface. And I hit up a few producer friends of mine and said, if you had £1,000 to spend on a full set of drum mics, what would you buy? And I got a few different lists in, and I kind of looked up reviews and accumulated the lists a little bit. And I didn't want to just go and buy like a drum mic pack. I wanted sort of proper workhorses that would be, I wouldn't regret buying.
I actually recently just sold my first drum mic kit that I got from Shure, like those PG 52, whatever it is. Yeah, I just finally sold them in my attempt to save up for new studio monitors, which I'm on the verge of buying. So, yeah, totally.
That's it. So I wanted to make sure. So the way I kind of think of it is, I just wanted to get those. What are those stalwarts of studio mics that don't cost the earth? That, you know, like a 57, for instance, on the snare. I wanted confirmation from all these people that for 57 on the snare is absolutely fine. You know, because I'm endeavoring to play on songs for money. It needs to be at that point in time, it needs to be the right thing, and I want to make sure that I can be confident in the setup I have. So that was about 5 years ago, and I started, you know, just sort of dabbling, doing a bit for friends, and played on a few albums just for mates. And then eventually someone says, "Oh, I heard you did this, and you could do this for, you know, would you play on my song? How much do you charge?" And you're like, "I've absolutely no idea." I don't know. And then that's kind of how it started. So I kind of spent the next sort of 2 or 3 years building up experience, I suppose, working out how remote working works as a drummer, because that's the thing people struggle with, isn't it? You know, when you're producing, a lot of the time now, everyone's got DAWs at home, and you know, they're all working in the box, and then when it comes to programming drums, lots of people struggle. So I figured that it would be an interesting place to start exploring, not necessarily just huge sessions, just almost sometimes hobbyist singer-songwriters who don't want to use Logic Drummer. So that's kind of how I was picturing it was going to pan out. So yeah, just spent the next few years trying to get my processes in order and work out what kind of conversations is it okay to have with artists about, you know, what they want on their songs. It doesn't lead to constant revisions. Just similar to how
I was
going to
ask you about that. Yeah, totally. Because I feel like when you're doing remote stuff, you really have to be on point with your communication with the artists. And I mean, I guess let's get deeper into that a little later on after you're done telling your story. But yeah, we'll get into it.
So essentially that was that, and it kind of snowballed a little bit, and I was earning like a moderate amount of money from the studio, and most of my work was live. And I always wanted to sort of gravitate towards it being mostly the studio and less live. You know, by now I have 2 young children and wanted to be at home a lot more. So I you know, slowly ramped all my gear up, got a nicer set of converters and outboard pre's and compressors and all that kind of stuff to make sure that it's all gradually just improving. And comparing the sounds I was getting with other sounds. So anytime I could get hold of some stems that were recorded at a huge studio, I would be comparing my sounds with those stems to make sure that I could be confident that I was delivering somewhere in the ballpark of what good studios were doing.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you got to aim high, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, maybe you could talk a little bit about some lessons that you've learned from that, like those analyses. Like, what were like some of the crucial things that you did that upped your sound game? Was it treatment, or was it microphones, or placement? Like, what do you think were the big things?
Treatment for sure. That was a really interesting one, actually, because the first space that I rented was quite low ceilinged and had carpet on the floor and a lot of sort of black drapes hanging around the room, which was made it quite a dead sound, but it was almost quite a boxy sound. And I never had full confidence in the sound of the room at that place. And then I moved studios to where I'm currently at, and it had, you know, that kind of click wood flooring that you can get. It's sort of not really wood. It's kind of like a woody plastic.
In Israel, they call it parquet. I don't know if that's what it's called in other places.
I think it is, yeah. It's that kind of thing. And then it had just plastered walls that were painted and higher ceilings. So maybe the ceiling must be 8 feet, 8.5 feet, something. So it's quite reasonably high ceilinged, but very, very lively sounding room. So that's where I really started to embrace the treatment side of things. So I kind of went from this room that was overly bright and too much information happening, and made acoustic panels and put them up and just kept going until it got to a stage where it was still lively, but not so lively that I didn't feel confident in it. And and now I'm really happy with exactly how it is. You know, there's enough movement around the room that the sound of the drums to me, it sounds great, but it's not so dead that there's no room sound at all.
Yeah.
So that made a
Totally.
huge difference to sort of, and that was a steep learning curve because I suddenly was in this place that was vastly different to where I was